Digital ID has made a resurgence, this time in the United Kingdom. But of course, given myriad other leaders fawning support for Kier Starmer, it seems inevitable in other countries, including, for example, in Australia, where Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese decided to appear at a Labour Party conference, lavishing support and praise over his mate, Kier Starmer. So we can see that what's happening in the United Kingdom sets a precedent for what might happen elsewhere. The UK situation involves a compulsory digital ID. I emphasise compulsory, because everyone is going to need to get one if they want to have a job. Kier Starmer dressed this up as a free solution to illegal immigration. Never one to waste a good crisis, he decided to use the immigration crisis, or the illegal immigration crisis to be specific, to force a digital ID upon everyone else. He's pretending that by requiring all employees to have a digital ID, and therefore for all employers to check it, it would somehow prevent illegal immigrants from being able to work, and therefore illegal immigrants from immigrating to the United Kingdom. But there's just one problem. It was already illegal for these legal immigrants to even be in the country, let alone work. It's not clear how the digital ID would really resolve this. After all, you would have thought that visa checking would be necessary. That often happens in Australia, and you don't need a digital ID to do that. The digital ID is overkill for what he's trying to solve. But I think that's the point. The point is, using illegal immigration as a wedge to try to force a policy he otherwise wanted to force upon us. Nevertheless, here's what Kier Starmer had to say about it.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
So in packaging this, like I've indicated, the whole thing is a sham. It's clearly ridiculous to assert that a digital ID is necessary to deter illegal immigration. You would have thought that the United Kingdom, being an island, would be able to do this via the gigantic moat that is surrounding it. You would have thought the United Kingdom would be able to resolve at least some of this via its moat, because people need to come into the United Kingdom via air travel for the most part, and therefore you would have thought they could check people at the border. Furthermore, the United Kingdom is not a large country, so if they spent more resources trying to police illegal immigration and actually prevent people from overstaying their visas and remove people when they did, and fewer resources policing people's social media posts, they might actually be able to resolve this. Furthermore, you don't need a digital ID to stop illegal immigrants working. After all, you would have thought the illegal immigrants are, for example, paying taxes. And if they're not paying taxes, they're already being employed illegally and under the table, and the digital ID is not going to do anything about that. Or phrased differently, if people are illegally employing illegal immigrants, they're not going to stop just because there's a digital ID. It's clearly a sham. It's clearly a pretense to force digital ID upon people and try to use illegal immigration as a justification. Ironically, this is actually an illegal immigration crisis that Kier Starmer's own government has helped to exacerbate. Now clearly there were issues with this before Kier Starmer became Prime Minister, but he has made it significantly worse, and significantly worse still through the schmozzle that is how police resources are directed. So you might be asking, what then does Kier Starmer actually have to gain from a digital ID? Why is it that he wants to use this illegal immigration crisis as a pretext to force this upon us? Well, the simple answer is control. A digital ID might start by being linked to employment. However, there is no limiting principle. There's nothing to stop them from expanding the digital ID. And if they didn't intend to do so, then they could have put controls in, but they've decided to not do so. In essence, they intend to expand the digital ID. They're just starting with employment. And they're trying to shift the so-called Overton window, that is the perception of what is acceptable, by starting the digital ID in the employment context, supposedly to tackle illegal immigration, and then expanding it. Think about it this way. Next time you need to verify your age on social media, well, it's easy to see, you'll just get people to use a digital ID to do so. To begin with, this is going to be voluntary. It's going to be a convenience measure, so you don't need to verify through other measures. But then it's going to creep in as being compulsory. In essence, the digital ID is going to become required to do things like use social media, or potentially required to register your car, or required to get a parking permit, or required every time you go and park your car somewhere, or required in the United Kingdom when you need to get your car into cities and therefore pay the significant levies that you need to pay when you're driving into the cities, required for more and more things, allowing the government to track your movements or track your digital footprint. And if you think this is ridiculous or far-fetched, just look at what the government in the United Kingdom is doing already, policing people's social media. It's not difficult to see that the digital ID is going to make that significantly easier for the government to do, something that involves ever more control from the government. For example, when you need to use your digital ID to verify your age on social media, it's a relatively easy step to link up all of your posts and all of your likes with your digital ID, thereby labeling the United Kingdom or really any other country, because this could expand to places like Australia or Canada or myriad other places, enabling the government to track which posts you have liked and what statements you have said, thereby enabling an implicit social credit score. And again, if you think that's far-fetched and fanciful, just think about how governments have tried to police so-called misinformation and disinformation. They keep trying to force this type of thing upon us all. The government is telling us out loud what they are trying to do, and you get willful idiots gaslighting us about their intention. Kier Starmer is ushering in a literal Orwellian dystopia, where the government controls exactly what you can say and do, and if you do things against what Kier Starmer likes, well, they'll send the jackbooted goons to try to police you. And I say this without a hint of hyperbole, because that is already happening. The main thing the digital ID is going to do is make it even easier for the government to control you and police you. Now, lest you get complacent about the situation in other countries, let's focus on Australia here. Well, Albo appeared in the United Kingdom in support of his mate, Kier Starmer. It is very clear they are on a unity ticket. Albo tried to push through a misinformation and disinformation bill in Australia, something that was a complete schmozzle and a terrible piece of legislation, an absolutely awful piece of legislation, so awful that even the Human Rights Commission in Australia came out against it. And it was so bad that it ultimately failed because Albo doesn't control the Senate. That's a saving grace to some extent of the political system in Australia versus the United Kingdom, whereby it's generally less common for the government of the day in Australia to be able to get all of their way. They need to control both the House and the Senate, which is generally more difficult for them to do than to get control in the United Kingdom. Of course, it's not as good as the situation in the United States, where it's even more difficult for the president to be able to force things through, but still, it's at least more difficult than in the United Kingdom. Now, that misinformation and disinformation bill failed because Albo didn't have control of the Senate, not because he didn't want the bill to go ahead. And it's very clear to see where this is headed. Create that free digital ID so that people can verify their age on social media. It's free and it's convenient, and the government's here to help. Now, the government might not require it initially, but it will be a convenience measure. It will be seen as the most convenient way for you to verify your age. And social media companies, not wanting to risk the ire of the government, and also wanting to save expense, will just wheel out that digital ID into all of their platforms. And then, after that, like I've indicated, it's not difficult to match up that digital ID with what people post. For example, if you're making YouTube videos, not difficult to match up that digital ID with the YouTube videos you are making. And the government could clearly force these social media companies to retain digital ID and match it up with user profiles, thereby essentially breaking online anonymity and effectively breaking people's ability to hold a tyrannical government to account. It's all about control. And even if you like Anthony Albanese or Kier Starmer, well, what about when they're replaced with someone you don't like? So if you like Anthony Albanese, would you be okay with Peter Dutton having this type of control? Now, control-freak politicians and bureaucrats seem to always seek new ways to exert control and to maintain their power. And if this were not about control, not about retaining power, they could have built in safeguards, but they didn't. The United Kingdom is telling us outright what they want to do. It is clear from their pattern of conduct. and it is obvious why. And it's also obvious why Kier Starmer is so incredibly unpopular in the United Kingdom. And we just have to hope that people in other countries, for example in Australia, wake up to the type of control the government is trying to force upon us, and kick these clowns out of government. And it might be that in Australia, the current opposition is a little bit underwhelming. After all, Susan Lee does seem like she dithers quite a bit. She doesn't seem to have a clear cut-through or a narrative, but at least at the moment, she is not on a unity ticket with a control freak. And it would take someone who is insipid and doesn't seem to really stand for very much over someone that stands for someone that is actively bad. That is, it is better to do nothing than to make things worse. But you can let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below.